Hey guys, thank you so much for joining me in another video. So as you can tell based on the title, well, today we are going to be talking about the top 10 major themes, styles, types of handbags we've been seeing this past fashion month on the runway. So for the fall 2025 collections, some styles I really love, some others not so much, but I thought this would be a fun video for today. So let's just get into it. So the first theme that we are seeing on the runway is probably the biggest one, and it's not just in ready to wear, it is not just in the form of handbags, but it is huge in ready to wear. And I think it is something that we've been seeing for the past, I would say, couple seasons at this point. When I'm talking about fur, and I feel like we've been seeing fur. There are some brands that have always done fur, but I think we started seeing fur in more like sculptural ready-to-wear iterations. Now for fall 2025, we're seeing that, but fur is not just on the runway in terms of ready-to-wear, it is also in the handbags. The first brand that I think of when I think about fur is Fendi. Fendi is known for their furs, and they just celebrated their 100th anniversary. Sylvia Fendi was leading the brand. Kim Jones left the last collection. We got to see iterations of the Fendi baguette. We saw like the Mama baguette, especially in these furry iterations. We also saw the comeback of the Fendi Spy bag, been around for 20 years at this point. And then for their more classic styles like the Peekaboo, the Fendi baguette, we saw, of course, furry iterations. I feel like this is something we've come to expect from Fendi, but it was very much felt this season because they are the leader of this. I think they had like a huge presence. We also saw fur at Chloe, saw it in the form of ready to wear, but also in the form of bag charms with these kind of like raccoon tails. Again, reminds me of mid-late 2000s raccoon charm trend. We also saw these fur charms at the Rabanne show. They also had these, it looked like polka dot calf hair bags. Michael Kors fur was heavily present on the runway in the form of their ready to wear, but also their handbags. Gucci had these very massive furry hobo bags. Lanvin had these calf hair bags. Balmain had these fur or shearling faux fur clutches. Dries Van Noten, I actually don't think this is fur at all. I think this is more just kind of like a fine fringe, but I feel like this kind of feels like an evolution of the fringe trend that we have also been seeing these past few seasons, but it just adds a lot of texture. Like that collection, it felt like it was so rich in texture, and this was a debut collection from Julian Klausner. Gabriela Hearst, we also saw furry bags. Also kind of side related, Ferragamo had their hug styles with these bright red feathers. Luar also had these feathers on the runway. Now, another major trend that we are seeing this season, and I just think this is something that is just very predictable, I feel, in fashion right now. With the 20-year trend cycle, you can almost expect whenever a handbag or any kind of style hits that 20-year point, if it's an it piece, almost expect a lot of these brands to reissue them. We talked about the Fendi Spy bag, very notable reissue this season. Also the Chloe Paddington, another super hot bag from 20 years ago, brought back by Chloe. Earlier this year, for 2025, it's like Murakami Mania. We're still feeling that 20th anniversary collection. And even just in terms of the ready to wear, we saw the Jade Dior t-shirt reissued, the McQueen scarf. It's just kind of a reminder, if you have any of these styles sitting in the back of your closet, or maybe you want to try to score a pre-loved bargain, some of these bags have gone up. Definitely the Chloe Paddington, you can find those bags for less than $200, but now they have gone up since this reissue, but maybe you can try to find like a deal. Also the Fendi Spy bag. But to get the look, you don't necessarily have to buy these exact bags. Like if you just look at the pre-loved market, we'll talk about some other styles in just a moment, certain silhouettes to look out for, but we're definitely seeing a lot of these like mid 2000s silhouettes come back in fashion. So you don't necessarily have to get these styles if you want the look. If you're on the Real, search 2005, 2006, filter it by handbags, you can see the types of silhouettes that were prominent during that time period. Let's talk about colors. Now for 2025, the Pantone Institute said the color of the year was Mocha Mousse. To me, brown never goes out of style, but according to statistics, tag walk for fall winter 2025, there was an uptick in brown. Brown was up 80% versus black was down 17%. To me, brown is super timeless. It's not really a trend, but apparently these are the stats. Of course, Mocha Mousse, it's more of this kind of like in between. It's basically like a milky brown is what they're trying to say the trend is, but I think what we're seeing on the runway is browns of all shades. So if you want to go for Mocha Mousse, We're still seeing chocolate brown. Brown in general is something we're seeing on the runway. We saw it quite heavily again at Fendi. We saw it at Miu Miu, at Prada. To me, brown is never really like a trend, but apparently these are the statistics. Now, another color I think that we are seeing quite heavily is this like very pale pink. Think like that cherry blossom pink. Again, pink is always in style. If you're a lover of pink, if you're a lover of brown, like this is always in style. But when we are thinking about these colors, it just means that there's just going to be more brands are going to issue a lot more of their styles in these colors. When we saw the Louis Vuitton Pharrell men's collection, they were going for that pale pink cherry blossom shade. Chanel also had the shade on the runway. Gucci, we saw the pale pinks. Fendi, we saw the pale pinks. But just to kind of add a little bit of a twist here, something very mid-2000s, I think, is just this combination of pink and brown. Of course, with that Pharrell collection, with the P9 Speedies, Fendi again had lots of pinks and browns. It makes me really think of like mid-2000s, like Juicy Couture. If I think about the personal style coloring of Hilary Duff, Neapolitan ice cream, again, the Pantone Institute saying that Mocha Mousse is a trend because it gives us these feelings of indulgence and comfort. But to me, I feel like this color combination does as well, but it feels a little bit more playful, more of that 2000s nostalgia. When it comes to silhouettes, another style of handbag that was on the runways this season were these bags. I'm going to call them bulbous bags. I don't really know what else to name these, but think about how hobo bags have been the past few years, a little bit more like slimmer and conforming to your body. If you think about like the Gucci jacket, it's very like slim, slender hobo style. These are like hobo bags. They've got a little bit more width, a little bit more roundness. And even if you just look at bags from the 2000s, like there was like this shift towards this kind of shape in the mid 2000s. Again, we've been talking about the Fendi Spy bag, the Chloe Paddington have more of that kind of rounded base, but I also think these kind of bulbous hobo bags, we saw styles like this at Chloe, at Schiaparelli, at Isabel Marant. They kind of speak to this kind of like boho resurgence we're seeing in fashion. Feels a little bit more relaxed, carefree, less structured, less formal. Don't ask me why, but I was going down this rabbit hole looking at the style of Ashley Simpson, and I was just looking at her Chanel handbag collection. Just these styles, like they really reminded me of the Chanel Spirit Cabas. And while this bag does feel very late 2000s, I could see this style and just bags with this shape coming back with a vengeance. This boho resurgence with fashion just wanting to be a little bit more relaxed, more casual, more carefree. I could see styles like this definitely coming back. Another style that we saw on the runway, and it's a trend I actually like quite a bit, are these exaggerated lady bags. Now, I think we've been seeing this since spring, summer 2025, but I definitely felt this theme, this overall theme with this latest Miu Miu collection. It was about this exaggerated form of femininity. There was silk, satin, these kinds of cone bras, these ladylike brooches, this vintage opulence with the accessories, faux fur, I think this is faux fur or shearling, not quite sure, these skirt suit sets, these top handle bags, these frame bags, these clutches. It feels very much in line with the like personal style of Mucha Prada. There is this offbeat elegance. It's a little bit more eccentric with the accessories, the quirky brooches. Even at Chanel, when I think of this kind of like granny chic look, they really played into this with these oversized pearls at Chanel. There were these like oversized pearl bags. Also at Vaquera, there were these massive big chunky pearls, these oversized bras, just this like play on femininity. When I'm looking at this, it doesn't to me feel like conforming to these ideas around femininity. It actually feels like an exaggeration of it. Of course, at Chanel, we had also these exaggerated clutches. To me, I feel like this is like taking a page from some of the things that we've been seeing at Coach. More of these oversized pearls at McQueen. Also makes me think of the designer of Simone Rocha with some of these styles. Of course, Simone Rocha, we also have to mention as well. Also, Rock had these multi-compartment kiss lock bags. Overall, this is probably my favorite trend, kind of taking this idea of these traditionally feminine styles, objects, and exaggerating it. I just thought was just really great. Big fan of this theme going on in fashion right now. Another style of handbag that we saw on the runway were these wristlet pouch bags. I don't know what else to call them. At Balenciaga, there was this bag, was like meant to be like worn on your wrist. Gucci also had a bag like this in this kind of like unique shape. Givenchy, for Sarah Britton's debut, one of the more notable looks from that collection was this cosmetic dress. And then there was this matching bag, again, the same same silhouette with this pouch and wristlet. An emerging designer, Roisin Pierce, collaborated with handbag brand Paulin to create these like wristlet clutches. They're like these ball shapes that dangle from this leather wristlet bit with bows on them. Another theme that was felt this season were these belts on bags, just belts in general, big chunky belts you would wear with your outfits, but also on the handbags. Schiaparelli had a bag like this, these layers of belts. Balmain also had these belted bags. Hodakova has also been doing this for some time, had these bags with these belt details. This is something we've been seeing for several seasons, but I think seeing these big belts on the runway, it's also reflected in the handbags as well. Another silhouette that we've been seeing for quite some time, I just have to mention it because it was felt on the runway, and I'm talking about these East-West bags. We've been talking about it for some time. Chanel had these top handle flap styles with an east-west proportion. Louis Vuitton also has recently launched the biker bag, and we're seeing newer iterations of the biker bag style. Valentino also had east-west bags on their runway as well. Another type of bag that we are still seeing, that we've been seeing for several seasons now, are these sort of utility side pocket bags. Of course, when I think of this, I think of brands like Chloe and Prada, but we saw this also at Chanel, at Louis Vuitton, at Stella McCartney. A continuous sort of trend we're seeing with this pocket trend, sort of a side mention here. Louis Vuitton had a few looks where the models were wearing these like side pockets. It almost was a duo bum bag, or these bags that you wore at the waist or at the hip to kind of create this defined hip look. We saw this at Louis Vuitton as well as Ferragamo. Interesting nonetheless. And then finally, I think a major theme that we saw on the runways this season was a lot of embellishment. At Lanvin, there was a return to the history of the brand. This was Peter Copping's debut. On the runway, we saw some of the Lanvin silhouettes of the 1920s. This theme of embellishment is also reflected in the handbags. For Bali, we saw studs, Jill Sander studs, and then of course Versace had bags with embellishment. Also, just a side note, with some of the bags at Chloe, of course the Chloe Paddington has the Paddington lock. We also saw these heart bags with these lock details, and also just the effect of bag charms, the embellishment, the adornment of handbags. This theme was also quite present on the runways. I think this is something that we will continue to see in fashion, where brands want to embellish their bags just a little bit more. So those were, I think, the 10 major themes that we saw on the runway this season. There were a lot of really great collections, a lot of really great debuts. Were there any handbags that you are excited to check out for fall winter 2025? Please let me know down below. Thank you so much for joining me in another video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.